Imagine a wedding day. The flowers are perfect. The lighting is perfect. The guests are smiling like they're watching the first scene of a fairy tale. The vows are spoken clearly, almost rehearsed. Everyone claps at the right moments. Everyone believes this is the beginning of happily ever after. But look closer. Look at the person standing at the altar. Not the smile on their lips, the eyes behind it. Because there is a specific kind of silence that happens inside the mind of someone who's about to marry a person they don't truly love. And it's not peaceful silence. It's not calm. It's suppression. It's the sound of a rational mind overriding a screaming heart. We're raised on a story. Love leads to marriage. Marriage leads to happiness. And if you're lucky, everything works out. But for millions of people, marriage isn't about passion at all. It's about stability. It's about security. It's about pressure. It's about running out of time. It's about choosing the person who makes the most sense on paper. Because the fear of being alone feels heavier than the fear of being unloved. And here's the tragedy. From the outside, it looks like you made it. From the inside, it feels like you disappeared. So, why do smart, self-aware people do this? Why do people bind their lives to someone who sparks no joy in their soul? And what happens to the human psyche when it's forced to live a lie day after day, year after year? Today, we're taking a deep dive into the psychology of the loveless marriage. Not to judge anyone, but to understand the invisible forces that push people into settling and the quiet, emotional cost that follows. Because sometimes the most painful loneliness isn't being alone. It's being married and feeling completely unseen. To understand why someone would marry without love, we have to dismantle one of the biggest myths society ever sold us. That love is the primary reason people get married. Historically, marriage was not a romantic milestone. It was a contract, a survival strategy, a way to secure land status, protection, and lineage. Love as the main requirement is a modern luxury. Something people started expecting when life became safer, longer, and more individualistic. But here's the truth. Even in 2026, that ancient survival instinct still runs deep inside the human nervous system. Psychology points to several powerful forces that push people into loveless unions. And one of the most potent is something called anuptophobia, the fear of staying single. You may not hear that word in everyday conversation, but you've felt its presence. Because there's a social clock ticking quietly in the background of our lives. By 30, you should be settled. By 35, you should have kids. By 40, you should have built a life that proves you weren't left behind. And as those deadlines approach, without the one showing up, panic starts to rewrite your standards. Your brain stops optimizing for happiness and starts minimizing risk. That's when the criteria shifts. You stop looking for a soulmate and start looking for a candidate. Are they stable? Are they loyal? Do they have a good job? Would my family approve? Do we want the same future? The logic becomes transactional. I may not love them, but they're safe. And for some people, safety isn't just a preference. It's a drug, especially for anyone who grew up in chaos, poverty, emotional neglect, or instability. When you've lived in survival mode long enough, romance stops feeling essential. What you crave isn't passion, it's relief. A stable partner doesn't feel like a love story. They feel like a shelter, a fortress against the unpredictability of the world. Then there's another trap, one that looks healthy on the surface, the value alignment trap. You meet someone who shares your views on money, politics, family, religion, ambition. You work well as a team. You don't fight much. You make sense. The mind starts negotiating with the heart. Look how compatible we are. Love will grow eventually, but often it doesn't grow. It simply exists. And that's where the internal conflict begins. Because the choice was logical, but the body keeps the receipts. From the outside, it looks like a maturity. From the inside, it feels like the first chapter of emotional exile. Here's the part most people never talk about. A lot of people don't marry without love because they're shallow or desperate or settling. They do it because their nervous system has been trained, sometimes since childhood, to confuse certain feelings with love. And that hidden engine has a name in psychology: attachment. Attachment is the blueprint your brain builds early in life about what love feels like, what it costs, what you have to do to keep it, and what you should expect when you finally get it. So when adulthood arrives, many people aren't choosing partners based on connection. They're choosing partners based on what feels familiar. For someone with an anxious attachment style, love doesn't feel peaceful. It feels uncertain, like you have to earn it, like you have to chase it. So when they meet someone stable, someone who's consistent and available, it can feel like salvation. Not passion, salvation. They're not thinking, do I desire them? They're thinking, they won't leave. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, the trap is different. Real intimacy feels suffocating. Being truly seen feels dangerous. So, they unconsciously choose someone they don't fully love because a lukewarm connection feels safer than deep vulnerability. They get closeness without the emotional risk. And then there's trauma. If you grew up with chaos, unpredictability, or emotional neglect, your brain can start mislabeling signals. You may mistake drama for chemistry. You may mistake anxiety for attraction. You may mistake stability for boredom. So when you find someone safe, your mind says, this is good. But your body, wired for intensity, whispers, this isn't love. And that's the moment people don't realize they're making a lifelong decision under the influence of their past. Because it's not always that you don't want love. Sometimes you don't recognize it when it finally arrives in a healthy form. So you choose what feels secure, what feels manageable, what feels like control, and you call it love until marriage forces the truth into the open. Now, let's get painfully honest, because one of the most dangerous things about settling is that it rarely looks like settling in the beginning. It looks like maturity. It looks like finally choosing peace. It looks like being responsible. And sometimes it even looks like love. So, how do you know you're not building a life with someone you genuinely desire, but simply accepting someone because they reduce your fear? Here are 7 signs you're settling, even if your mind keeps trying to talk you out of it. Sign number 1. Relief feels stronger than excitement. You don't feel drawn to them. You feel safe from being alone. Sign number 2. Your body avoids them. You can't explain it, but touch feels like obligation. Kissing feels like performance. Sign number 3. You feel lighter when they're not around. Not because you hate them, because your nervous system finally gets to breathe. Sign to talk to 4. You don't share your real self. Your fears, your weird jokes, your deeper dreams stay locked inside you. Sign Tauber 5. The future feels gray. It looks stable on paper, but emotionally, it feels like a hallway with no sunlight. Sign Tab 6. Your relationship runs on logistics: bills, groceries, schedules, kids. Everything works except the connection. Sign 7. You fantasize about another life. Not necessarily another person, but another version of you. The you who feels alive again. And listen carefully. This part matters. If you see yourself in these signs, it doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean your partner is not enough. It means your inner world is telling the truth. Because love isn't just compatibility. Love isn't just stability. Love is aliveness. And if the relationship requires you to shrink, numb out, or disappear, that's not peace. That's emotional survival. Once the wedding is over, once the photos are posted, the honeymoon ends, the guests go home, something quietly terrifying begins. Reality settles in. And for someone who married without love, the first psychological battle is not with their partner. It's with their own mind. Psychology has a term for this: cognitive dissonance. The mental pain that happens when you're forced to hold 2 contradictory truths at the same time. Truth A, I promise to love this person forever. Truth B, I feel nothing when they touch me. That contradiction creates pressure, and the brain, desperate to reduce discomfort, starts building defenses. You rationalize. You tell yourself, passion is childish, that chemistry fades anyway, that real love is duty, that this is what adulthood looks like. And for a while, the story works. But the body doesn't believe your story. The silence returns in different forms. Tightness in the chest, irritation over nothing, emotional numbness, a constant low-grade sadness you can't explain. Then comes the deeper cost. Loneliness inside marriage. Most people think loneliness comes from being alone. But the most painful loneliness is being next to someone and still having no one to truly reach. This is the loneliness of the unshared self. When you can't share your real thoughts, your deeper fears, your playful side, your vulnerability because something in the relationship feels empty, you start cutting pieces of yourself off. Little by little, you shrink. Conversations become transactional. Did you pay the bills? What's for dinner? Who's picking up the kids? Not hostile, not dramatic, just hollow. And that's how a marriage can look perfectly fine from the outside, while on the inside, one person is slowly disappearing. And here's what most people don't understand. You can't logic your way out of a marriage your nervous system doesn't feel safe in. Because even if your partner is kind, even if they're loyal, even if they've done nothing wrong, your body still registers their relationship as emotional deprivation. And emotional deprivation is stress. Not loud stress, not screaming fights, quiet stress, the kind that never ends. When you live year after year without real connection, your nervous system adapts the way it always adapts to long-term discomfort. It either stays activated or it shuts down. Some people become chronically anxious, restless, irritable, hypersensitive to small things. Their sleep breaks, their appetite changes, their mind won't stop running. Other people collapse inward. They don't feel sad enough to call it depression, but they don't feel alive either. This is functional depression. You still show up, still work, still smile in public, but privately, you're exhausted for no clear reason. You lose desire, you lose curiosity, you lose color, and then the scariest part happens. You stop trusting your own emotional signals. You start thinking, maybe this is just adulthood. But no, this isn't adulthood. This is your body keeping score for a love you never received. When a core human need goes unmet, especially the need to feel emotionally seen, your brain doesn't just accept the emptiness. It searches for a substitute. Because the hunger for connection doesn't disappear just because you signed a marriage license. So people cope in 3 common ways. First, indifference. This is the path of least resistance. You lower your expectations to 0. You stop hoping for romance. You stop fighting for intimacy. You turn the marriage into a roommate arrangement with shared bills and shared responsibilities. On the outside, everything looks peaceful. On the inside, you're living in emotional grayscale. Second, displacement. If you can't get love inside the marriage, you pour your life force somewhere else. Work becomes the addiction because at least success makes you feel valuable. Or your children become the emotional center of your world. You become a perfect parent, not only for them, but because you secretly need someone to need you. Third, seeking. This is the most misunderstood one. People think it's about being selfish. Often it's about starving. So the fantasy life begins. Old flames on social media. What if thoughts at night, romance novels consumed like oxygen, emotional affairs with coworkers, because one genuine conversation feels like water in a desert. And sometimes the substitutes get darker. Porn, alcohol, shopping, gambling, anything that creates temporary sensation. They aren't always bad people. They're often emotionally malnourished people trying to feel alive without blowing up their lives. So why don't they just leave? From the outside, it seems simple. If you're unhappy, walk away. But psychologically, leaving a loveless marriage isn't just a decision. It's a collapse of an identity. Because once you've invested years, money, family approval, shared friends, maybe children, your brain starts playing a brutal trick called The sunk cost fallacy. I've already put so much into this. I can't let it be for nothing. And the longer you stay, the heavier it feels to admit the truth. Then comes shame, not the dramatic kind. Quiet, corrosive shame. The shame of feeling ungrateful, the shame of breaking vows.